All right, let's call the Operations Committee of the Guilford Board of Education to order, meeting to order. Today is July 13th, 2020, and we have a quorum present. The first order of business is to deal with the committee minutes of June 8th. Does anybody have any comments relative to the June 8th minutes? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any comments on the Standing Building Committee minutes? Hearing none. Let's move on to the reviewer of the month, who turns out to be me. All right. Bless
Bless
you.
you.
Bless you.
Just bear with me. It's such a stack. Oh, wait, I think I have. Okay. Well, let's see. All right. So these are the financials for June. However, they're not, June is not closed because we will continue to pay bills into July. So there'll be a revised June number, which we will have next month. In terms of the individual items on the sheet, there wasn't anything that was particularly stood out. It's clear that people are trying to get their bills in, but I understand from Linda that there's still quite a pile of them out that are not, we haven't received yet. So it's hard to make a projection as to what's going on. Linda feels that we will definitely be in surplus, probably in the tune of $200,000 to $250,000, which is a huge improvement over what we've done in the past. Although I think that number could swing around a fair amount because, as I say, some of these vendors are a little slow getting their stuff in. Looking at the warrants, there were a couple of things that were that caught my eye. If you look at ACEs, for example, on page 1, you have the usual stuff, and then we have these $66,000 and $70,000 and $80,000 charges. It turns out that we have people who are at ACEs for tuition. I mean, they're actually there, but we also use ACEs as a vendor for various services that we contract for. And so the big numbers are the monthly contract payments. Let's see.
That's a new one for me to hear. So can you just explain exactly what those services are?
Jason, do you want, I see Jason's in the
Sure.
meeting. Jason, do you want to speak to
Jason.
that?
Yeah,
Yep. Hello, everyone. How are you tonight?
Good, thanks.
We contract ACES Behavioral Services for 5 behavior technicians who support our students with autism, as well as 2.5 BCBAs annually. That's
Jason, will
2.5.
you define a BCBA, please?
yeah, please.
Sorry about that. Board certified behavior analyst who supervises our students with autism and behavioral needs.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So these are people who are on our site?
Correct. They come and
Yeah.
work on our school sites, but they are contracted vendors rather than employees.
I see. Okay. All right. And let's see here. There were a bunch of other small things, but there wasn't anything big in the warrants that stood out. But do other people have questions about either the financials or the warrants?
In the warrants, I'm noticing just a lot of disposable face mask purchases. Now, I understand that's a necessity, and that's going to continue. That number is going to continue to grow, especially as we, as students come into the mix. Is there kind of a unified plan for purchasing those? Because I'm looking at it, it looks like they're from a whole bunch of different vendors for masks. Is there, district-wide a plan in place for PPE type equipment?
I can,
Early on in the early purchases, we were purchasing when there were still shortages going on. So we were scrambling to try to get whatever we could. Moving forward, I think both Cliff and Linda can try to speak to what we're going to attempt to do moving forward.
so yeah, I've been working to try to procure the least expensive face masks that we can find. So we've been really going through multiple different companies, playing them off each other to really drive the prices down. And we've been doing that over the last month. So as we've been able to drive the prices down and we feel comfortable that we can get our hands on the quantity, that we put in a purchase order and pick up a bunch of masks. So we today recently put in for another purchase order for about 30,000 masks after still playing that game with various vendors to try to drive the price down as far as we could go. And we feel comfortable that we've gotten a large quantity at a very good price. So we're really just trying to be, in the best interest of the town, work with vendors that will work with us to drive the prices as low as we can go.
Very good.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just a quick question, Cliff, to that. Is there any benefit to having more buying power with the town if there's a need on their side as well? I mean, I know we're a big enough district, but is there any benefit in that or savings that could be found?
I have not reached out to the town. Obviously, the quantities that we are purchasing are probably 10 times greater than what they're going to get. So I don't think it would be a huge benefit to us. However, it could be a huge benefit to the town since we are buying in a huge quantity. So, I could reach out to them in the future and see if they want to piggyback off of our orders so that it drives their price down and they get them at a better price.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah.
There have been conversations at the learn level about districts coming together and attempting to purchase collaboratively. Those are still early at this point. And to be quite honest, right now, we're competing with our neighbors. Everyone's doing exactly what Cliff is doing, but we are having those conversations about trying to take a breath, take a step back, and look into doing something collaboratively on a regional level.
Actually, I received the Learn prices today, and I also had the Circ prices, which was another bulk buying, and the prices that we placed the order for today were better than both of those. So Cliff did a really good job of driving down prices and getting us the very best price that I've seen from any vendor or any consortium.
Good.
Paul, quickly, with the mask requirement for students and faculty and staff, is it on the district that if children, their families can't provide for that, or, students arrive at the on the bus without them, the bus driver is going to have masks on hand? Like, I know it's that's getting in the minutia, but is this the idea, is to have like
Yes.
a surplus amount to cover those kind of needs?
Yes, so we're going to ask families to make sure that they've got multiple reusable cloth masks for their students, and that they send students to school in those masks to help us keep our costs down. That said, we will have disposable masks available on every bus and in every classroom for the students who forget, misplace, lose, soil their masks during the school day, that we will be able to then supplement during the school day. If you recall, really early on, the initial guidance came out from CDC, and it calls for 3 masks a day per person. We had priced that out, and if we were meeting that need exclusively on our own without relying on the families, it was going to be north of $250,000 for us to provide. So just as we ask for parents to provide pencils and markers and page dividers and ring tabs, we're going to ask them this year to provide masks for their students, but we will supplement as needed. Nobody will be refused entry to the bus or the school for forgetting their mask. We will have backups available.
Okay, thanks.
One of the things that I discovered when I was going through the warrants was that we had some negotiations with specialty and with the special ed drivers like Curtis Motors and Livery and some of these others. Linda, it would be helpful if you could explain to the committee the way you did to me, the different kind of discounts we got and how we arrived.
Sure. So for specialty, the first thing that they did was they removed some of the ancillary midday runs and wasn't charging us for those. And then as we were hearing other districts were getting bigger discounts from their vendors, we went back to them and they took an additional discount out. So in total, specialties discount is just over 13% from our regular bill. The other companies, it varies between a 40% discount to a 20% discount, or 20 to 40%, depending on what services they provided, what expenses they were trying to cover. Some of the smaller companies, we ended up covering a little bit more, but as long as they were maintaining their drivers, we were paying them a negotiated rate.
Are there any questions on this? Because this is something that kind of evolved over time, but did save us a fair amount of money.
And was in alignment with one of the early executive orders. Remember, we were working to make sure the company was able to maintain their drivers, both for our own protection as we reopened and to help keep unemployment rates down statewide.
Yep.
And all those discount rates were right in line with the same discounts that other districts were getting as well. So.
Okay. Any other questions on the financials? All right. Now, this is the meeting when we usually try and set up the schedule of reviewers for the year. And Linda, are you the keeper of the list?
Actually, the list was emailed to Katie, to Dr. Balistraci. So I believe at some point during the next meeting, that list will be distributed for everybody to sign up for future months.
Okay, well, we may or may not have physical meeting at that point, so we should be sure to, let's put it this way. There's 12 months to be covered and there are 9 of us. So everybody's got to serve at least once, and some of us are going to serve more than once. I volunteered to do next month also because that's going to be the 2-month close, and that's a tricky time of the year to be doing the reviewing. But after that, I think everybody needs to look at their calendar and give either Linda or Katie an indication of at least 1 month that you could do this. To the extent that people who are relatively new to the board want to do this for the first time, I would be happy to work with them the first time they do it and show them exactly how you go about it.
We can create a Google Doc for the board and have that out to you tomorrow. You'll each just have to fill in which month you'd like to cover, and I think that would be the most effective way to do it between meetings, Mr. Sands. We're happy to do that.
That's what Terry has sent to Katie already.
Yep. We'll just share it with all of you, and you can each fill in your own month. Yep, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, that's what she has already.
Okay, good. All right. Moving along, we have some bids to review. Linda, are you the one who wants to go over this?
Sure.
Yes, she is.
Get my list here. So there's the bid for custodial supplies, which we do every year. We bid out 76 of the commonly used items. We did get 13 different vendors submitting bids, and there was actually a 14th one, but it was arrived late, so they were disqualified. On the memo that was sent to you has a list of all the vendors that had submitted bids. Upon reviewing the bids, we are only going to award to 7 of the 13 vendors. And the reason we do that is we look at not only the price, making sure that they submitted on that we want and didn't substitute, as well as shipping options. So if they only had 1 item and we're going to have to pay a lot of money for shipping, it's not cost effective for us to award 1 item to 1 vendor. So what I'm asking for at the next meeting is that they be awarded to the 7 vendors that has submitted the low bids, and we want to award them to. And I can send that list out. Sorry, I should have done that before, of who the 7 vendors are. So that's the custodial bid.
So Linda, we'll need to have those 7 named companies for the next meeting so we can make a motion including the 7 awardees.
Yeah, I will send it out as soon as I can, so that we can have it for the next meeting. I just received the list right before I left the office today, so I'm sorry, I should have done that earlier.
Just out of curiosity, Linda, do those vendors change much year to year? Or are we trying to stick with what we know best, in terms of relationships?
Most of them are pretty consistent. There is one new one, which I'm not sure where this vendor came from, but they are a manufacturer of trash liners. We have a couple vendors who only bid on the trash liners. And this is a new company. They manufacture their own. They sent us samples that look really good. So we're awarding to a new vendor for the first time this year, but all the rest of them are ones that we've used before.
And then we will need a motion at the next meeting. Mr. Sands, would you want to make the motion at the business meeting to approve those vendors? We'll make sure that we have the list of 7 to you in between the meetings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so the second bid is for trash services. It's for all of the school buildings, including CO North. It doesn't include Lathrop House because they don't have their own dumpster. There's no room for their own dumpster. They share with the library, and we split the cost with the library. There were only 2 vendors that bid, And the low bidder was All Waste Services, which is, it happens to be our current vendor. So their rate is listed in the memo. It's $5,224.14. Whoa, sorry, my papers are blowing away. Per month for the school year and $4,116 for the summer months. So we are recommending that the bid be awarded to All Waste for the 2021 school year. There's also an option to extend this bid for 2 more years if we continue to be satisfied with their services. And their rate increases were very minimal as proposed in their bid. So
Is there an incentive to sign on for those 2 years early as opposed to waiting?
No, because we pay it monthly. It's
Gotcha.
not something we pay annually.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 bids. Don't have the agenda in front of me. If you want to talk about the technology lease.
That is the next item, Linda. Yep.
Okay.
Well, do we, are we going to approve the trash removal bid at the regular meeting?
Yes, we'll need a motion for that as well, but you have the information. We just need to approve the award to All Waste. And then Linda will bring up the possible extension later in the school year. There's no reason to act on that tonight.
Okay. All right, Linda, can you give me the winning bid on the All Waste again?
Sure. Their rate for the school year is $5,224 a month. And the summer months is $4,116.
I'm sorry, it's the summer months or what?
$4,116.10.
And all of that information is complete in the board packet tonight. So a motion that simply said to award to All Waste for the rates listed in your materials tonight would be appropriate. It was just on the other one, we didn't have the final information to you.
Okay.
This one's all set to go forward. You can either state those rates or just refer to the packet materials.
Okay, all right. Okay, technology and support vehicle lease.
Okay. So this one, there's actually a couple parts to. One, you have to waive the bidding process for the technology lease. And the reason that we have you waive the bidding is because there's only a couple vendors that will do this kind of lease. So we've tried going out to bid and we still only get the 2 vendors. So we're going to waive the bidding process and we've requested proposals from the 2 vendors. So
that's not another request. We do this pretty much every year with you. We simply don't have an active enough field to be able to put this out to bid and ask you to waive this policy every year on this lease.
Right. The bid, awarding the bid itself. So we've always done the technology lease every year. In the budget process, the board approved the leasing of a vehicle for facilities. Well, as we started that process, the municipal financing company through the dealership wanted 6.25% interest, which I felt was way too high.
No kidding.
I checked around and found out that it is possible to combine it with our technology lease. It's now going to be a capital equipment lease. And the low rate that we got for the capital equipment lease is 1.38%. So in next year's budget, it saves us about $10,000 in payments from what I estimated the technology lease interest rate to be and the estimate on the truck lease payments. So we're saving money in the first year of lease payments, and we're saving money overall on the total price of the lease with financing versus going with the 6.25%. So what
Winning bidder was what? TD?
Oh, TD Equipment Finance.
And what was their rate?
1.38% for a $400,000 lease. So the annual payments will be $82,140.83.
Just important to note that you're buying a plow truck with your Chromebooks this year.
It's a technology plow truck.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, that's why it's a capital equipment lease now. I have to remember to change my wording.
It's a virtual plow truck.
Out of curiosity, was the JP Morgan Chase significantly higher than the 1.38?
Yes.
Okay.
They were. Sorry. They actually came in at like, they were close. Oh, they were at 1.62.
Jeez, that's a big spread for a finance.
And I didn't go back and ask them for a $400,000 lease because their rates were so different. If the rates were closer to begin with,
Yeah.
Because I had originally only asked for a $350,000 lease and then revised it to a $400,000 lease, and only went to TD Equipment because the rates were just so much lower. And it wasn't going to change that much with TD Equipment to make it go below what we had. Chase. Chase wasn't going to go much lower to make it work. So what we have budgeted for next year for the lease payments is 93,000, almost 500, 93.5 almost. And we're only gonna be paying 82,000. So we've got a good savings next year in our budget by doing this lease.
Good work on that, Linda. Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
No problem.
Thank you.
Also on the regular agenda, you're going to be approving the resolution that authorizes us to proceed with the lease and authorizes the signers of the lease documents. And a copy of the resolution should be in your board packet for the regular meeting. So that's also on your regular agenda.
That is listed as item 9.6, so we would just need somebody to make a motion for that as well to approve the resolution as identified in item 9.6.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions on what Linda has just gone over? All right, Linda, let's talk about budget transfers.
Okay.
Everybody else can go home. This is just Linda's meeting tonight.
Oh, no.
Oh, Linda. This time of year.
Oh, no, Cliff will have his turn. So these are, the budget transfers that are in the memo are to cover expenditures. As I know, at the end of June, there will be another set as we close out the year, especially seeing the other pieces that we're trying to close out. So we're going to cover the over expenditure in legal for 70,000, contracted services for 100,000, safety, sanitation, and upkeep in grounds, building and grounds for 100,000, site improvement for 100,000, and special education budget buses for 62,000. We're taking the transfers from the coaching line, which has money available because we didn't pay the full stipends for the spring season.
That's athletic coaching. That is not
Athletic coaching,
instructional
yes.
coaching. Instructional coaching comes out of teacher salaries.
Information systems, which has funds available because there was a transfer of a position to the teacher salary line and had some vacant positions during the year. So there's savings in that line. The paraprofessionals line has some savings, and the medical line has some funds available. So we're asking for transfers from those four lines to cover the overages that we are aware of as of June June 2020. So if you have any questions on those, if not, those will be need a motion at the regular meeting.
And again, this is an annual exercise. We need to clean up the books and just make sure that we move the surpluses and the deficits so that we end up closing the books in balance. Every line needs to balance, and so we need to make these sorts of transfers.
Just to remind the committee, the way this works is that the budget as a whole gets approved, and the bottom line to the budget is approved by the Board of Finance. But the Board of Ed retains the ability to move items between categories during the year as needed. And that's what these budget transfers are doing. And as Linda said, we do this every year because a budget is just an estimate. And we will probably do it we will do it next month because when we get to the actual close, then things will look a lot different. All right. Okay. So, how about food service? Have we got anything to report there?
We excused Erica from the meeting tonight, but I think Linda can update us. There's not much.
Yeah, we don't have the final financials. We're still working on closing out those books. We'll have it next month.
Did we get the state reimbursement?
We have not received it all, but we will. The last one that we received was for April. So they still owe us for the May and June payments, and I'm sure we will get those. The state's just a little slow on sending some of those out lately. So they're not going to be great looking financials, but
We expected that.
services did great work during this time. They really did a phenomenal job getting those meals out and feeding the community. So
Certainly did.
Erica and her crew definitely should be commended for their hard work.
Absolutely.
And Erica is working with the reopening design committees. She is working on lunch designs that will be required both for a full opening with health and safety measures in place, a partial opening that would have reduced populations in the buildings with health and safety measures in place. And we need to determine what to do should we move back to a full distance learning model. So Erica has been collaborating with Jason in his office and working with the reopening design committees on all of those models.
Paul, is there any additional funding that we know of that will be available for that? Because I can imagine that, you know, just the packs, you know, say we're delivering lunches to classrooms and packaging things and whatnot. Is there, this is just going to have to make do with what we've got approved for now, and then
There could be monies coming forward. So the CARES
Okay.
Act came forward already, and there were
Right.
monies for school districts involved in that. We only received about $114,000 from the CARE funds. The HEROES Act is looking to be authorized. A number of us from the state met with our state delegation last week. We met with both senators and all of the representatives. We missed Rosa DeLauro. We'll be meeting with her tomorrow afternoon. We have strongly encouraged all of our representatives to do whatever they can to move forward the HEROES Act at whatever level is possible. We also encouraged them to push back against the allowance of any loopholes into the act as were allowed in the CARES Act. In the CARES Act, because the regs were written by the Education Department, Secretary DeVos put some guidance in there that districts have a choice. You can either spend the money only on the Title I schools identified in your district, or if you wanted to spend the money across all the schools in your district, that would have to extend to include all private and charter schools in your location as well. So a large portion of the dollars are being siphoned off in communities that have multiple private schools. In Guilford, we're fortunate we don't have any private schools this year with Guilford addresses, so that doesn't impact us. But we've asked in the HEROES Act that that loophole be closed and that that not be allowed to happen. If HEROES comes through at the levels they're talking about, Guilford could be seeing more than $114,000. It would depend on what the regulations were on how to spend, but we should be able to use whatever dollars we receive to offset expenses, some of which would be in food service, but we're also looking at additional expenses in nursing costs, probably in substitute costs, likely in busing costs if we have to add a monitor to every school bus, even for a portion of the year. So the HEROES Fund would be used to offset those unanticipated expenses that we could be seeing, and food service is one of those areas, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It'll depend on what limitations they place on the monies. We'll have to wait and see what the final guidance looks like.
Okay. How about a tuition report?
Okay, I emailed out a copy of the tuition report to everybody earlier. But I actually have good news. We
Yeah.
right now are projecting that we are going to be just about $70,000 under budget. For the first time in a long time.
First time in about 8 years.
All right, Houdini, how did you pull this off?
To be serious about it, it was because of the distance learning closure and the difficulty in providing all of the regular services to students. So while Jason and his team made sure that we met IEP requirements, distance learning did result in some lower costs. Jason, do you want to add anything to that?
No, just we did have some movements and restructuring of student programming as it came down to it. Some settlement agreements that we negotiated with our attorney and counsel that assisted in the reduction as well.
Well, certainly good news, and we'll assume going forward, Jason and Linda, that this magic will continue.
So I was actually going to say this is nothing that we should count on as we move into next year. Next year is going to. So now I will add that in all of the meetings that I just referenced with our delegation, we also pushed for full funding of IDEA. All of our delegates here, our senators and our representatives, all recognize that special education families and advocates and attorneys will be looking to make claims this year moving forward. If there's ever a year to fund IDEA fully, this would be the year to fully fund, and our representatives are acutely aware of that. So we are not looking to place limits on services that are provided to special ed students. We're not looking to curtail anybody's access to a free and appropriate public education, but we do believe that the federal government should be meeting their obligation to fund the portion that they have always promised to fund. Now, I don't anticipate that'll happen, but our representatives in DC will be pushing for that this year.
Yeah, good luck. Okay. Linda, the bearer of good news again, let's look at the health insurance report.
Okay, so I sent that out to you earlier as well. This is the report that reflects through May. She didn't have, I checked with Mary Jane prior to the meeting, she didn't have June's report done yet. But as you can see, the low claims trend has continued. I do think that that is going to start picking up a little bit more. But for right now, that's good news. We have a projected fund balance at the end of the year of just over $6 million.
Jeez.
Which, you know, is very, very good. We did some additional claims that were covered by the stop loss insurance. In talking to Joe Spurgeon, he said that if we even cover up to 70% of the premium, we make out pretty well with the stop loss insurance. So I don't think we'll exceed the premium, but with one more month to go, I don't think that's going to happen. But that's still over $1 million of claims that we did not have to pay from our claims.
Well, and to put this in
Premium.
perspective, this is the first year in a long time that
Right.
the claims haven't exceeded the premium. So, I mean, the dragon has to eat once in a while, and I think this is going
Yes.
to be.
So in talking to Mary Jane, and talking about the current year, I asked about making the contribution to the medical fund for July, and right now she's telling us to hold off. One, because they have a cash flow issue slightly due to tax payments not being made now. With the delay of the tax payments being due not until October, that they have watching their cash flow. So for right now, we're not adding any money into this fund. We will pay it at some point. But for right now, we're not paying it. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So,
Okay.
other than that, that's all I have.
Well, I think that we should all be aware of the fact that the claims this year are unusually low. And I think that the virus scare could be part of the reason for that, in that elective surgeries and elective procedures, and even a lot of doctor's visits, have been put off by people who are afraid to even go near the hospitals. And but that doesn't mean that these people aren't sick, and that this demand for service or need for service isn't there. And as the hospitals go back to a more normal mode and doctors start seeing patients again, I think in the next fiscal year, we could see some substantial catch up. So we'll see. I mean, I'd like to think that this is going to continue, but I'm worried, to be honest with
The claims are going to catch up.
you. Yeah,
They're not going to stay this way forever.
no, I think that's right. All right. Thank you, Linda.
Sure.
Okay, Cliff, Linda's been a hard act to follow, but let's give it a try.
So update on a few of the projects that we have going on. The first one is the Melissa Jones HVAC project. They're making the final connections on all the heat pumps, which is good news, with hopefully expectations of getting parts of the building back online, possibly at the end of next week or the following week. They've started removal of the old air handlers. There's 2 large old air handlers that have to be torn out. So I was actually up there today. They've cut a huge hole in the side of the building and have extracted the main air handler out. They still have a few more parts to pull out, but they're moving along nicely with that. So that project's moving, along on schedule and on budget as it stands right now. The other Melissa Jones project, which technically doesn't start until 2021, is the window project, which is the replacement of about half of the school's windows that weren't done in, I think it was about 2012. The first phase was done. The good news we had come back this week was they did the additional testing for PCBs. And although, as we had figured, the caulking and glazing did come back hot for PCBs, none of the surrounding materials, so none of the brickwork, the block work, or any of the ground soil came back positive. So unlike Baldwin, where we had to spend probably upwards of $300,000 to almost $500,000 tearing out those materials and putting in new ones, we won't have to do that on this project. So that really helps us save some funds there on the project. So They're going and finishing the last of the specifications and drawings to incorporate the hazardous materials that do have to be removed. And then we should be good to go to bid late this year, early next year, and get that project underway early next spring. Over at Baldwin, we have completed phase 1 of the HVAC project. The only thing we have really left is getting the documentation in, so the operation, maintenance manuals, things of that nature, warranties, and all that. But as far as construction's considered, it's done and closed out. So moving on to phase 2, they will be starting demo hopefully this week. They have some materials on hand. I spent a good portion of last Thursday or Friday working with the engineers and the contractor, trying to resolve issues with piping, because there's a considerable amount of additional piping that is required for the heating and cooling, and most of that piping was going to be installed on the roof. So it was going to be rather expensive, which was part of the initial bid anyways. But after working with the architects and engineers for a while and doing some new calculations, they've been able to reevaluate and reuse a lot of the piping that's actually installed in the building. So we're hoping that by doing this, it should decrease the cost of that project. We don't know by how much, but I would think it'd be significant numbers. But we'll know more when we get that change order. But really the main reason for that was when they did the original calculations, they used 140 degrees as our set point for the hot water, which isn't the case. We use 180 degree hot water when we get down to below freezing. So because we can run the temperature up, we didn't have to have the volume that they were requiring. So the pipe sizes that are existing in the building can be reused. So that was also very good news. So again, we hope to see a credit for much of that work that was going to be done up on the roof. Moving to Calvin Lee, the only update we have there are the doors are supposed to be delivered this week. I did take the principal through the operation of the demo door in the nurse's office, and she's actually quite excited to see how that operated. It works quite well. It gives us multiple flexibility and operational, I think, ways of the staff being able to actually utilize the lock and the position on their door, so that as we start to go through and maybe we don't want to close our doors, we want to leave them open and leave them in the locked position, we can do that. So we hope to have that project technically started later this week or next week to install all the doors in that school. And I'm working with the Standing Building Committee on moving forward with the next 2 to 3 schools. So they'll be hopefully approving that next step at their next meeting on the 4th of August. Over at Adams, we also completed 1936 window repairs. So those are all complete. So all those windows should operate correctly now, which again is a critical piece moving into the fall, because as many of you know, that's their only real way to get ventilation. So now that they can open and close those windows safely, they'll be able to do that when they return to school. So that was a good project to get completed this year. The other project at Adams that we are finishing up is the north parking lot. The rear north parking lot is supposed to be paved, weather permitting, later this week. And then we are also working on phase 2 of the second half of that parking lot to create a parent drop-off. We had a snag because we found an unmarked potential gas line, which is running near our electrical lines. So we're in the process of doing some further excavation work to determine where that gas line goes. We think it's an old abandoned line, but either way, we have to determine that before I tamper with our main electrical and we look at how to splice in the new electrical. So a little bit of a kink, it's pushing us back a little bit, but hopefully we'll still maintain schedule and have that done for the summer. So, and then the last project we have that is nearing completion is the facility needs assessment. We have a preliminary report that will be coming out, and the Standing Building Committee will receive a copy of it on the 21st. They'll give them an opportunity to go through it and get their eyes on it a little bit. And then once we have that brief review, we'll schedule a meeting, I'm assuming as we've done in the past, with the Board of Ed, the Standing Building Committee, and potentially the town if they wanted to attend as well. So we're moving along nicely, and some things are coming to a close, which is always good, and we'll keep pushing along. So that's the end of the report.
Are there any questions for Cliff? Okay. I assume that
I think you have a question.
Sorry, I had myself muted. Just a really quick question, and this may not be for Cliff, it may be more for Paul. And moving forward in talking about the parent drop-off at Adams, I'm sure you have started to talk about, the parent survey went out last week about, will you opt to put your children on the bus? Will you probably opt to drive? And have you guys talked from a facilities perspective or with the bus company about semantics for that, or preparation, or things that we might need to be budgeting for or working around to accomplish a smoother drop-off process at the buildings?
Yeah, we're in process for that. We're having conversations with the principals, particularly the middle school principals. In both of those settings, students were dropped off in conditions to facilitate bus runs that will not align with the idea, the plans around cohorting and social distancing. At Baldwin, students were dropped off and held in one large gymnasium area students arrived before the teacher contractual day began. Same thing at Adams, except that students had time to move through the hallways, visit their lockers, and in fact touch base with teachers more independently, similar to the high school. Both of those are going to have to be reviewed, and that will have some impact possibly on the bus schedules. On the other hand, we are seeing the results from the survey that are coming in, and they're suggesting that as many as 25 to 45% of our parents may be choosing not to have their students ride the buses next year, which could then, that reduced ridership has a couple benefits. One, it provides more social distancing for the students who ride the bus. And two, it might provide a little more latitude and faster runs that we could then make up some of the time that we lose for drop off. We will be losing some instructional time to drop off, and in all settings, we will be losing instructional time to dismissal procedures. Right now, dismissal procedures do not move in the direction of either cohorting or social distancing. Creating dismissal procedures that do that will obviously take more time, and that will creep into some instructional time. The increased parental drop-offs will create some traffic concerns. We have already met with the local police chief to inform him of that, let him know about our needs around that, and we'll be working closely with the police department. This parking lot work at Adams was scheduled prior to the COVID concerns. It may help to alleviate some of the concerns there, but it will be important for the community just to recognize that with increased parental drivers coming to all of our school locations, traffic in front of all of our school locations is going to be impacted both in the morning and PM times. For 10 years, I've been encouraging parents not to drive to school and to please take advantage of the buses that we provide. This year, we are actually encouraging in the opposite direction. So there will be traffic implications. We'll do everything we can to mitigate them, but the reality is there will be traffic implications at all of our buildings, I think particularly at Adams and at the high school. And the police will work with us to manage that properly. We will work our way through that as we get closer.
Okay. Any further questions of Cliff? Cliff, do you feel that from a facilities point of view, that we'll be prepared to, all 7 schools will be prepared to open on time?
That's our goal. So as it stands right now, yes, we will have some challenges as always with a couple of the projects, but primarily, Baldwin will be a tight schedule. But again, if we are unable to fully get that system running, we will take any necessary steps to bring in additional cooling, heating, or ventilation to ensure that the students have that for the opening day.
Okay.
We will open on time. It's just a matter of what condition the schools will be in when we open. Remember, last year Baldwin opened with temporary flexible plastic ducting running all over the building in order to allow us to open on time.
Okay. I didn't receive any communications. Did any of the committee members have any communications they want to bring to the full committee? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned as of
6:57, I show.
57.